Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our 7th annual Munson Hospice Breakfast. My name is Deborah Henderson, and I am the president of Munson Healthcare Foundation. And I am so grateful that you've joined us for our virtual hospice breakfast this year. We are delighted to welcome you back. This is our second year of being a virtual event, and while we are very happy to continue with this tradition, we look forward to being back in person next year. We have so many guests today joining us from across the region, Traverse City to Grayling, Cadillac to Manistee, Interlaken to Frankfort, Elk Rapids to Boyne City, Charlevoix and Gaylord, and many other locations in between. I think this does illustrate the impact and the reach that Munson Hospice has on patients and families across our region. Entire area of Northern Michigan is covered by Munson Hospice. And I think that everybody here today represents that, and thank you. Munson Hospice is truly a service that runs across our entire system, serving all 7 of our community hospitals and further reaching into our rural areas. Many of you joining today are longtime supporters and breakfast attendees, and we are so honored to have you back. For those of you joining for the first time, welcome. Thank you for being here, and we are so happy to have you with us. This beloved annual event celebrates all that Munson Hospice means to our patients and the families that we serve. We do have a very full agenda this morning with many wonderful speakers, so I'll keep things moving along. I'll be back closer to the end of the event with an opportunity for you to make a donation. But now I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Reverend Dr. Homer Nye. Homer is a longtime supporter of Munson Hospice and a well-known community member here in Traverse City. He served as a senior pastor of Traverse City Presbyterian Church for many years. He has served on boards of many nonprofits for so many years, and he currently is on the board of Food Rescue, Generations Ahead, and Rotary Charities, and he also served on the Munson Healthcare Foundation's board for many years. We are so honored to have Homer back this year to share a much needed reflection. And now it's my privilege to turn things over to Homer.
Well, thank you, Deborah. It's really good to be with you again. This has been one crazy year, hasn't it? I don't know about you, but I was up and down and around and over and wondering what was going on. It's been a crazy year. I was thinking last year when I introduced this program, I began by saying, welcome to the first annual virtual hospice breakfast. Who could have guessed that we would now be at the second annual virtual breakfast? Who could have guessed it? But here we are. We're going to be virtual breakfast buddies once more, and that's good. I'm not sure what you were doing during COVID or what you have been doing. Like many people, I did a lot of reading. Becky, my wife, and I went for long walks most of the time. But one thing I decided to do that probably not a whole lot of people decided to do was I decided I'd start raising chickens. Now, that sounds kind of weird, but I've had chickens before, so I thought, why not do it again? It's interesting when you raise chickens, you get them about one day after they're hatched. I know my chickens were born at 5:30 on a Tuesday morning, 11:30 on a Wednesday morning. The post office called me and said, your chickens are here, come get them. Well, they're really small, but they grow fast. I had them in a cardboard box about 18 inches high on the sides. But in 2 weeks, they had little feathers on their wings and they were hopping and jumping and even starting to fly a bit. And I thought, I got to put a top on this box, but of course I didn't. So the next morning when I went to the shed and opened the door, there in the middle of the floor was this chick who was not moving. She wasn't cheeping like she was afraid. She was just staring straight ahead. When I opened the door, she didn't even turn to see me. When I talked to her, she didn't turn to see me. And so I reached down, I picked her up and held her for a bit and put her back in the box, and then life was okay again for her. Now, as I thought about that chick, I wondered how many of us have felt like that little chicken on the bottom of the floor. You know, many things can take us there. Maybe this past year, you've had a few COVID moments that have taken you there. Many people have. David Brooks, a national columnist, was speaking a few weeks ago and talking about how he was so muddled. He just wasn't performing. He wasn't writing the way he could. Maybe you felt that way. Maybe you've had a COVID moment or two. But long before COVID, lives were turned upside down. There was divorce, loss of a job, accidents, wars, natural disasters. You remember 9/11 and how we were transfixed to that television, watching everything we could, not knowing what was going to happen, being scared, concerned. Yeah, many things can take us to that place. Now, as supporters of hospice, we know that one of those moments can be when our physician says to us or to someone we love, "I'm really sorry. I've done everything I could. There really is nothing else that I can do." Now, if you've heard those words, you know how the bottom of your life seems to drop out. You know how hard it is even to breathe. You can't focus. It's like having your head held underwater and trying to breathe. Such a scary, terrible, awful feeling. Many of us have experienced that in lots of ways. Those times, at that time, we find ourselves much like that little chick, almost catatonic. We have jumped into a whole different universe and our world is shattered. Where'd it go? Now, over 40 years in ministry, I have performed nearly 700 funerals. And during that time, I have walked the road with hundreds and hundreds of people. I've walked it with those who are dying, and I've walked it with those who are caring for those who are dying. One of the things I often discovered or found was that the caregivers are in as much shock as the person who is dying. What can I do? How am I going to do this? Can I get through it? They're overwhelmed. They too just don't know what to do. They're shocked. Is there anything I can do that will really matter, that can make a difference? Well, everyone is different. But I know that for me, when I am in one of those dark places, there are some things I, at first, don't really need. I don't really need a pep talk at that point in my life. Pep talks are nice. I've given them to people, and I really kind of appreciate that people want to give the pep talk to me. But at that point, I don't really care one way or another, to be honest. I'm not thinking about that. Likewise, what I really don't want is some platitude, especially religious platitudes. Now, I know that we people are limited in how we can express ourselves, and I use platitudes too. Everybody does, and I can appreciate that. But man, right away, I don't need that. And most of all, what I don't need is someone trying to engage me in some deep religious or philosophical thought about the meaning of life. I think about those sort of things, obviously I do. But at that moment, that's not what I need. What I need is for someone to put their arms around me, to hold me, to touch me. And through that touch, I begin to feel a sense of love. I begin to feel a sense of someone with me that matters. And that's what I really need. And I would guess that's what a lot of us need. Now, over the years, we have known about the great power of physical touch. I remember in seminary, we read about an orphanage in Austria that they were overwhelmed. And there were so many infants that they couldn't really care for them. And those who didn't get much touch failed to thrive. They died. I also read about an experiment here in our own country in 1944, where they took some infants and some of them were given a lot of touch and a lot of care, and others were given just the minimal. They stopped that experiment after 4 months because those infants who were not touched failed to thrive. They died. They had to stop it. Touch was too important. Now, what I've also discovered or experienced over the years is that physical touch with someone who is dying can really become the catalyst for opening the emotional and spiritual touch that people also need. As I think about all of that and remember the number of times that's happened, and as I remember the time when my own wife was dying, I remember how important it was to physically touch, to hold, and through that, allow the power of love and the power of presence to be there. In my life, as I think about it, I believe there is nothing greater that any of us can ever do than to be able to touch another person's life in such a way that that life is made better, in such a way that that life is somehow opened up. I don't think there's anything more important or anything greater. There's nothing more than we can accomplish in life that counts for anything other than being able to touch another person and make their life better. Now, I think that's just as true when someone is dying. No, we aren't going to change the outcome. No way we can do that. But as we touch them physically, and then through that begin to open up the emotional and spiritual touch, we bring to them a power of love. And what is most needed is for people to know they're loved and to know they're not alone. It's a tough journey. It's a scary journey, but it's one that when someone stands with us, becomes more bearable, becomes more possible. Yes, in a sense, we are opening life to them as they face the final stages of their life. But that opening is the most important thing that we can do. Never underestimate the power of physical touch, not only to make a difference in that moment, but also to be the catalyst for the emotional and spiritual touches that are also deeply, deeply needed. I really believe that that sense of touch, that sense of love, that sense of being held is really about all we need in life, really, especially at the end of life. What else do we need? There's nothing else that can really make a difference. There's nothing else that can really open us. And so don't forget, as they used to say in a commercial, to reach out and touch someone. You will be doing the greatest thing that you can ever do in your life. You will be making a huge difference to those around you and to that loved person that you are helping on the path to death. So thank you for having me here today. I really do appreciate it. And as Deborah mentioned, I'm hopeful that next year when we have this breakfast, we can actually pass muffins to one another. Let's hope that. Now, I would like to introduce Sherry Wilson, who is the Vice President of Munson Healthcare of the Home Health and Hospice Program. So, Sherry, it's all yours.
Thank you, Homer. Really appreciate that introduction, and always appreciate your perspective and your stories. Helps kind of put things in perspective for us. Well, again, welcome to this 7th annual Hospice Fundraiser Breakfast. It seems odd that we're doing this again this year. I won't go into that. Everyone has already talked about this kind of strange new world that we're doing virtually, but for now, this is how it will be. And I wish I could see your faces, but I know there's many of you who have attended our breakfasts in the past, and hopefully some new folks as well. I've been with Munson Hospice for about 12 years here in Traverse City and serving their 23 county region. And I've been a nurse about 36 years. So it's really what we're seeing right now is pretty unprecedented and really hard to believe a year ago that we would still be here doing virtual presentations, but here we are. In spite of the pandemic and everything that has gone on, we've continued to provide care across the region, never missing a beat, making sure that our patients and their families are well cared for. You know, COVID really impacted healthcare tremendously, as you all know, but particularly hospice, and really kind of three main areas. You know, first of all, our volunteers. We've had to suspend our volunteers, using our volunteers for now, out of an abundance of caution, making sure that they stay safe and our families and patients and staff stay safe. We're hoping that within the next few weeks, as the pandemic abates and we get some of our restrictions lifted, our volunteers will be able to come back and join the hospice team. They are so critically important to the care we deliver across the region. So we're looking forward to that. The other way the pandemic has impacted is at our hospice house here in Traverse City. You know, we really had to restrict the number of visitors and the time allowed. We, unlike skilled nursing facilities, maintained some visitors able to come in, but it was really limited, which really kind of goes against the hospice philosophy. We want family and friends around that patient as they go down their journey for end of life. We want them to be there and be supportive. And with the pandemic, we had to really limit that. So that made it very difficult at our hospice house. And for those patients who we serve in our skilled nursing facilities, they were in such a state that families could not be there at all. So a lot of times our hospice staff was with those patients as they were dying and did not leave them alone. So really had an important role, particularly in those two facilities locations during the pandemic. And then the third way that it really has impacted us is that our staff has had to adjust to kind of a new norm. The personal protective equipment, the masks, the gowns, the gloves, sometimes the shields, all of that really has become, more of a normal, but it's cumbersome. There is somewhat of a barrier there. So throughout all of that, we have continued to provide care. And last year, Munson Hospice served 950 patients across the region. So we did not see a decline. We continue to provide service. And then our bereavement services. I want to focus on our bereavement services a little bit. Our bereavement services extend beyond when the patient passes away for another 13 months. And I know you're going to hear from Erin Gray later, but I want to focus on a few of the highlights of our bereavement service. And during this time of this COVID pandemic, I think folks are feeling more isolated and lonely more than ever. So I think our bereavement services are really critical during this time, especially. Last year, we served about 300 bereaved individuals, and we did that by reaching out to them either with a phone call or a handwritten note or a newsletter, over 43,000 different contacts to those 300 plus individuals from our bereavement team. And that's without our volunteers. So we're really looking forward to having our volunteers come back and help with that. And then we continued with our support groups. We went virtual with those, and we did about 330 virtual support groups last year. So obviously couldn't meet in person, but continued with our support group services virtually. across the region. And then we also had our butterfly releases. Some of you may have attended those in the past. We did those virtual this year as well. And our butterfly release is really a memorial service to honor those who have passed. We have butterflies, and family and friends can release a butterfly in memory of their loved one. We did that virtually, and it across 8 different areas, and it continued to serve the need, and we're hoping next year that we can also do that in person. And then we send out mailings to our family members who have lost loved ones on the anniversary of their death. We sent out over 100 of those this year. So just kind of touching on some of the bereavement services that our team provides that I do think sometimes are overlooked, and it's a really important service that is part of Munson Hospice. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about our fabulous hospice team led by Dr. Rahman Barraza. He is our medical director for hospice and palliative care. He's been here a number of years, and he's phenomenal. He leads our team, and we have a new physician who joined us last June, Dr. Peter Tucker, who you will hear from later, who is also fabulous. And together they lead our hospice team of nurses, social workers, home health aides, spiritual care advisors, our chaplain, our volunteers. So the entire team works together to provide that care. One of our spiritual care advisors emailed me recently, and she said, I've just been thinking a lot about the impact of my patients on me over these last several years. And she wrote a couple things that I want to share with you really briefly. She writes, hospice care is about life, difficult times, good times, love and celebrations, endings, and even beginnings. Individuals and families inviting us into their home for a time and sharing moments of life in homes, facilities, campgrounds, and even motels. The memories are made story by story and become part of our stories as staff. We go to where the patient is. If the patient is, not in a home, a traditional home, it doesn't matter. We will see that patient where they are. And there's a couple examples here. The son and mom living in a hotel room for 7 years, the son faithfully providing care and support after his mom declined physically. With the help of hospice staff, his mom died at their home instead of a facility or a hotel room. Another note, she writes, the family whose son was on hospice, the courage displayed by his mom, especially when her spouse also was admitted to hospice, and she provided care to both of them at the same time. Courage, especially when they died only a month apart. And then lastly, a war veteran who did not want to die, but who could not live much longer, facing death the same way he faced life, with stubbornness, fierceness, and fighting to live with quality every second he could, with the help of Munson Hospice. These are just some of the impactful memories that the spiritual care advisor shared with me, but maybe best stated by the daughter of a hospice patient recently. She writes, hospice is wonderful. It is the most humane, loving thing we can do for a person at end of life. And I couldn't agree more. Our team is phenomenal. They have persevered through this past year, continuing to provide care. But I want to say that without the generous ongoing support of our donors and fundraising events like this hospice breakfast, many of these events or many of these services that we provide across our region would not be possible. So I want to thank all of you for being here this morning, for continuing to donate generously to support our patients and our hospice in these communities that we serve. We could not continue to do all of this without your generous support. So I really appreciate that on behalf of Munson Hospice. Thank you so much. And now it is my honor to introduce to you the medical director of Munson Hospice and Palliative Care, Dr. Rahman Barraza.
Thank you very much, Sherry. So, as Sherry mentioned, I'm the medical director of Munson Hospice Care and the medical director of Munson Palliative Medicine Program. Hospice care is medical care for patients who have a life-limiting illness. Many individuals at this stage of life are looking to spend their precious limited time and energy in the most meaningful way possible. For many patients, this means being at home with family and loved ones, wanting to minimize suffering and to optimize their quality of life for whatever time of life they may have remaining. This is a complex and seemingly lofty goal to achieve in the face of complex advanced illness, but these goals are possible and made a reality every day by the expertise, emotional intelligence, compassion, and collaboration of the Munson Hospice Care team. I'll make brief mention of palliative medicine. Palliative medicine is specialized medical care that focuses on providing patients relief from the symptoms and stress of a serious illness. The goal is to improve quality of life for both the patient and the family while they pursue life-prolonging or curative intent treatments. Specialty palliative care teams are relatively rare, especially in rural communities like ours. We provide our services at the Cowell Family Cancer Center, in the Munson Professional Building for our non-cancer patients, and in the hospital at Munson Medical Center. In the past year, the COVID-19 pandemic has brought unexpected circumstances and challenges. I could share various examples about how our staff have adapted to continue to meet the needs of our patients. But in the face of limited time, I'd like to emphasize one meaningful way Munson Hospice has set itself apart from any other facility and any other hospice agency in the region. Munson Hospice House is a gem of a resource to our community that is only sustainable through the donations and support from individuals like you. One of the tragedies of the last year has centered around patients who are receiving hospice care at nursing homes. Nursing homes in large are not allowing family to visit their loved ones receiving hospice care in their final weeks or months of life. The simple and historically meaningful act of holding a loved one's hand at the bedside is no longer possible for these patients. At Munson Hospice House, we are innately and especially aware of the humanistic aspect of care and the necessity and power of family and loved ones in maintaining life and quality of life. Throughout this pandemic, Munson Hospice House has consistently maintained a safe and thoughtful visitor policy that strikes an intelligent and compassionate balance in minimizing risk of spread of COVID and allowing family and loved ones to be at the bedside of family during this stage of life. I'm proud of our leaders, staff, and hospice program when I receive messages of gratitude from patients and families because they are able to simply be with their loved ones. I'd like to share with you a letter I received from the husband of a patient who received care from both our palliative care and hospice teams that I think exemplifies the benefits that patients and families experience. Dr. Barraza, a brief note to thank you and your team for the excellent care you provided my wife. It starts when we were at Terry's bedside following her surgery, when we were informed of her stage 4 colon cancer diagnosis. In that fog, we were struggling with heading home with hospice support to await her death. Through the advocacy you and Andre provided, we were introduced to Dr. Hector Word, one of our oncologists at the Cancer Center, who ultimately agreed to attempt chemotherapy. The ensuing 6 months were guided by your home healthcare services and Cowell Family Cancer Center. The exceptional care we received from our home care nurse, Cheryl, helped us stay the course. Weekly coordination from Ben, the pharmacist who provided the TPN feeding, always included kindness and encouragement. As we decided to make the change to hospice, the support, sensitivity, and kindness we received made such a difference. Not sure how you have assembled such an outstanding team. Please know what a difference it makes to families facing such powerful events. Thank you. I have a good idea about how we've been able to assemble such an outstanding team, but I want to extend that husband's gratitude and message of thanks to you because your donations and support make it possible to assemble an outstanding team and provide this important care to patients in our community. As both our Munson Hospice Care and Palliative Medicine programs mature within the Munson healthcare system, our teams must continue to grow to meet the needs of patients. Last year, our team hired Dr. Peter Tucker. Dr. Tucker came to us from downstate Michigan, and he brings with him the knowledge and wisdom of an experienced palliative care and hospice care physician. As medical director, I'm fortunate and privileged to have a physician partner with common values and a common vision for the ongoing growth and expansion of our services throughout the Northern Michigan community. I would like to introduce Dr. Tucker to you now and invite him to share a little bit about his background experience prior to coming to Munson, why he chose Munson Hospice Care, and what his impressions have been since joining our team and community. It's my privilege now to introduce you to Dr. Peter Tucker.
Great, thank you for that kind introduction, Dr. Barraza. It is wonderful to be here with all of you this morning. I am happy to say that I survived my first Northern Michigan winter. This is coming from a Southern California native. I was born and raised in Huntington Beach, which is a small beach town along the Pacific just south of LA. I went to Occidental College, which is also in Los Angeles, and later medical school at University of California, San Francisco. I returned to Southern California where I continued my residency training in family medicine with Kaiser Permanente before beginning my active duty tour with the US Air Force. I was very fortunate to start my medical and military career as a faculty member at the Travis Air Force Base Family Medicine Residency Training Program. I spent 5 years on active duty as a family physician as well as a flight surgeon. And it was there that I started down the path of hospice and palliative care and became the base liaison for the EPIC program, which stands for Education in Palliative and End-of-Life Care, training other providers in primary palliative care throughout Travis Air Force Base. When my wife and I decided to leave active duty service, we relocated to Southeast Michigan to be close to my in-laws. So for those of you who are wondering why a Southern California beach bum relocates to Michigan, that's why. I joined Beaumont Health as a family medicine faculty and later as a residency program director. I continued to provide end-of-life care and was able to practice that part-time. But between 2010 and 2014, I had the opportunities to pursue full-time hospice at both the University of Pennsylvania and then Henry Ford Health System, working as a hospice medical director, providing care in both outpatient and inpatient hospice environments. I also became board certified in hospice and palliative care during that time. I was then recruited back to Beaumont Health, where I assumed the role as family medicine department chair at the Royal Oak campus and went back to school for my MBA at the University of Michigan. Ultimately, while certain aspects of my career were blossoming, I felt that I was losing touch with the aspects of medicine that most mattered to me. I was in clinical practice part-time, and an even smaller portion of that time was devoted to end-of-life care. So after a lot of thought and consideration, I decided again to pursue full-time end-of-life care and landed here at Munson. So I often get asked why palliative care. Having trained and practiced family medicine, I've done everything from prenatal care and obstetrics, pediatrics, end-of-life care, and everything in between. I felt and still feel that while we do a lot of things very well in medicine, we tend not to focus on the end of life and allowing people to die well. I wonder sometimes, what if we devoted as many resources to the end of life as we do to the beginning? What would that look like for us? So I've decided to devote my clinical practice to improving, even if it is in the slightest way possible, the end of life experience for my patients and their families. I also get asked why Munson. I chose Munson because of how closely tied to the community the health system is. There is a palpable sense of commitment and devotion to the people and communities that surround our facilities. There is a sense of obligation almost to their welfare, which I have found to be very refreshing. It has also afforded my wife and I the opportunity to live in one of the most beautiful locations that we've ever visited. Since arriving at Munson almost a year ago now, I continue to be impressed with this sense of community. This is a highly specialized health system that blends modern technology with neighborly connections and commitments. This carries over to the hospice team. There is a devotion to the system, but more importantly, to the patients and families that we work and live with. There is a sense of responsibility to the community, and the hospice team honors and nurtures that sense of connection every day by caring for patients and their families at the most difficult times in their lives. One thing that continues to impress me is a simple reflection of how this connection touches us. As you can imagine, we are frequently saying goodbye to our patients as they pass from this life. With each passing, the nurse present for the death often sends out a little note to the team, not just announcing the death, but often including a few personal comments about the patient, their life, their family, a hobby, or some small piece of personal information like their favorite sports team. This helps us honor that person. Even at the most difficult time, who that person was comes through, and this often triggers additional comments and anecdotes from other staff commemorating their life. So that is one of the most special things that I actually look forward to almost on a daily basis, is receiving those affirmations and that expression of love and compassion for those patients. So I want to thank you again for your time this morning and for allowing me to share you a little bit about myself, and for the very, very warm welcome. Now I'd like to introduce Sharon Newman from our Munson Hospice Bereavement Program.
Thank you, Dr. Tucker. Good morning, everyone. It's such a privilege to be here with you today, and truly an honor to work with such a high caliber team of professionals here at Munson. For those of you who don't already know me, my name is Sharon Newman. I'm an advanced grief recovery specialist and certified senior program manager who joined the Munson Hospice team as a bereavement coordinator in 2015. I came to focus in this professional area long ago, actually, as an outcome of my own grief recovery after a succession of tragic losses in my own family and decades of work with the international rare disorder community. When I first joined Munson Hospice, my call to action was to expand our bereavement program from Traverse City throughout the 23-county Munson service area in northern Michigan. The need was great, and our team responded, logging many hours and miles, visiting the communities we serve, establishing support groups, and creating caring connections so that we could reach and support our friends and neighbors, coping with the tremendous adjustments that are an inevitable part of life after the death of someone we love. As you can imagine and have heard from Sherry and others, our program has grown significantly, serving thousands each year. And our team of bereavement professionals provide a highly trained and supportive presence not only to Munson Hospice patient families, but to anyone in our community coping with loss. The support is available for over a year. And not only that, these services continue to be a free benefit to all those we companion on the journey through the forest of grief toward reconciliation and completion. And this support that we provide is made possible because of the generosity of our caring community. As you might imagine, the families we serve are gratefully surprised to learn that we are here to support them for such a long period of time. And these services, as Sherry mentioned, include in-person, telephone, virtual one-to-one support, open generalized support groups, as well as structured evidence-based grief classes, a supportive and educational mailing that reaches over 1,500 people each month, and our special healing events such as the wonderful Memorial Butterfly releases we enjoy sharing with the community in honor of all our loved ones. This year, in response to the COVID pandemic and the many losses experienced throughout northern Michigan, our program has also been relied upon by hundreds of families directly impacted by the death of a family member due to COVID. As you're probably aware and has been mentioned, during the greatest regional COVID surges, the inability to be present. Not everyone was able to be at Hospice House, unfortunately. And the inability to be present during a final illness or being able to be present together as a family during such a sacred time of transition has created special challenges for the grief journey. As a result, the grief we're dealing with this year is a bit more complicated. As you can imagine, not being able to hold the hands of someone you love or provide that consistent loving presence in their final days to provide a comforting presence as a family, to say, I love you, to say goodbye in person, or even hold a traditional celebration of life, leaves a painful wound that, even though we understand why in these crazy times, these wounds take time and special support to heal. Even in my own family, we lost my father-in-law and my mother's sister under these challenging circumstances. And this was painfully hard, very hard. Many of you here today have also had this experience. My heart feels yours. But even during these most challenging times, we're finding our way. Love is guiding us. We're not alone. We're able to lean into each other in this shared global sense of loss and help each other begin to walk on a healing path. Our team has the privilege of being part of and seeing the renewal of joy and purpose in people's lives after companioning them on the long walk through the forest of grief. As sure as the sun rises every day, with the proper guidance and support, the sun can and does shine again in our lives. As dedicated hospice team members, we're often asked how we're able to do what we do. In answer, I like to explain that we take the hands of one person at a time, embrace them in our caring presence, and then we walk with them, one step at a time. And together, we weave the colorful threads of their powerful personal experiences into the tapestry of their lives. And we begin to walk toward tomorrow's sunrise, keeping the eternal bonds of love and connection with those who have walked before us through that thin veil between this life and the next, close in our hearts. We say their names. Saying their names is often accompanied by the ringing of a Tibetan Naga singing bowl. The deep and vibrant tone of the bowl, when it's sounded, is said to create a warm spiritual connection with those we miss. I invite you now to close your eyes for a moment. And as I ring the bowl, remember fondly those who are no longer with you on this side of the veil, and to quietly say their names. Thank you for remembering. And thank you for sharing this special time this morning with us. Thank you for your generosity that supports the work of Munson Hospice and caring for you and your families, your friends, and our neighbors. The truth is, we couldn't do what we do without you. And we're grateful. At this time, I'd like to introduce my treasured friend and colleague, Erin Gray.
Thank you, Sharon. And thank you, everyone, for being here today. Sharon said, my name is Erin Gray, the bereavement coordinator, and I'm a licensed professional counselor and a certified grief counseling specialist. I've been in this position for a little over a year now, which means the entire tenure of my position has been during the pandemic. So needless to say, it has been trying at times. And the end of a long day when my heart is heavy, what I come back to again and again, and what I have to hold on to is love. The intensity, the depth, and the beauty of the love we have for those we have lost. And I pray and I work to have that love overwhelm me at the end of every day and not the sadness. Because the pain, the longing, oh, the ache for their presence, and just the loss of direction that we feel, it's because of our love. It's because of how deeply we have loved. That's why we feel all of that. And that love, those stories of our love, they deserve to be shared. They call to be shared. And in our work as the bereavement team, that's what we do. We open up a space, we open up our hearts, our ears, and we say, come, share your story, please, and let us open the doors of healing and peace and guide you. And it is such an honor for me to hear those stories and hear about love every day. We all have a story, and what you are about to watch next is the story of a few of our families, and it is beautiful. And I hope you have the same reaction I do, that these stories, yes, there's sadness, they may bring tears to your eyes, but please don't miss the beauty. Please don't miss the love, because that is what keeps me going every day. So without further ado, here's a video from some of our families and their stories of love and loss and beauty.
I strongly recommend a book by C.S. Lewis, A Grief Observed. It really was profound in my journey. But I want to use a quote from that really kind of explains and describes Michelle and what she meant to me. And so she was my daughter and my mother, my pupil and my teacher, my subject and my sovereign, and always holding all things in solution, my trusty comrade, friend, shipmate, fellow soldier, my mistress, but at the same time, all that any man friend, and I have good ones, has ever been to me, perhaps more.
Jack enjoyed traveling. We didn't get to do a whole lot of that until, our older years. We were busy with kids during our younger years, and he was very much a family man. And one of my best memories that I have was we were able to combine traveling and our family, and for our 50th wedding anniversary, we took the whole family, kids, grandkids, spouses, and went to St. Lucia for a week. And that's just something nice to look back upon. Jack was very much into his family and his job. He was a selfless person in many ways, and loved Northern Michigan too.
She was the most honest, selfless person I'd ever met. She always wanted to do things for others, doing things for her kids, for her sisters. She, holiday, a birthday, an occasion came up, she always wanted to get the meal together. She always wanted to, make sure everybody had a good time, to gather people together.
Michelle had breast cancer, which then eventually metastasized and continued throughout her body. We were receiving treatment at the Cowell Family Cancer Center, which is a wonderful facility. We're so fortunate to have that in our community. So we transitioned to some palliative assistance through Munson. And once we found that the progression was, the cancer was progressing even further, we inevitably ended up coming that we needed hospice care. And it was a very simple and easy transition from the Munson Cancer Services to palliative care and eventually into hospice care.
Well, when Jack was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, we were at our condo in the Lansing area. And after his treatments wrapped up, he really wanted to spend what time he had remaining in northern Michigan. So we came up to our place in Lake City, and we had several very nice months that he could enjoy at our place on the lake. And then as his disease progressed, we just needed more help, especially help controlling his pain.
When she chose to stop treatment and I was talking to her, and we were somewhat inconsolable, I guess, for a period of time. And we had no answers. We had no idea what to do next. If I remember correctly, I think Dr. Brown had called in Dr. Barraza to come in to speak to us. We had no idea who he was. Well, we came to find out that he is an absolutely wonderful human being. The first time he came into the room, he sat with us for over 2 hours, answering whatever questions came to mind, which as we talked, more and more questions came up. He explained palliative care and hospice and how that worked. For him to sit down with us for 2 hours, 2 days in a row, answering whatever questions we had, and not just answering questions, but letting us know that what the path we were embarking down, we weren't going to do it alone.
Hospice was there as much or as little as we needed. They came in and checked on us very regularly. They did things like, bathing Michelle, draining her catheter because fluid is building up on her lungs, did checks on her, making sure her medication was going as well as needed to be, answering every silly question that I had. So I'm sure I drove them crazy, but hospice was truly amazing in that regard.
He was not thinking straight. He kept thinking he could get out of bed and walk places and drive cars and do things. So you just could not take your eyes off of him at all. So we were very, very relieved, and our stress was reduced when Jack was able to enter the hospice house. And I believe that Jack felt at times that he was difficult to care for and that it was hard on his family. And I think that distressed him. And I think he was also relieved when we came here to the hospice house.
All the nurses and aides that came by were very diligent and knowledgeable on the restrictions and administering services and treatments. It was amazing how much they knew in such little time, and how comfortable they made us all feel with everything related to COVID and how we were all not only dealing with the knowing the loss of our loved one was approaching, but also dealing with the pandemic, which was right at the beginning stages of.
We looked into different kinds of care plans, and because of COVID, none of the care facilities in the area were allowing visitors. And I just was very determined not to let my husband die alone. And coming here to the hospice house allowed limited visitation and I could be with him and next to him during his final days.
You need help in this time, and you need to seek out help. So I made a conscious effort to, if people offered, to accept the help offered. And so there were, from hospice, once in hospice, I was receiving mailings. And I also received a phone call or two from Erin Gray. She introduced or had mentioned the grief recovery program that was being administered under the umbrella of Munson Hospice through Sharon Newman. So I reached out to Sharon, and we had a couple conversations, and she signed me up for the class. Honestly, I don't know where I would be today if it wasn't for that group and the services I received through Sharon.
I remember walking into the kitchen and I saw on that island, I saw Erin's card, and I said, I need to make that call. So I did. She said, we have this group and we meet on Tuesdays, but because of COVID, we just do it over the phone. And I said, okay. And I got on the call, and I don't remember if I shared the first time or not, but I remember thinking when I got off, I thought, boy, I don't know if that's for me. It doesn't feel engaged enough. And I talked to Erin some more, and I remember one of the gentlemen on that call that had been on it for a while. He said, John, give us a few weeks, and before you write us off, because we're worth the time. Well, we're at 10 and a half months, and I'm still there. It's on my calendar. It's on my phone. I work my life around that.
One thing that counseling did for me is, you think you're okay after something like this happens, but now I know you really are not okay. I was forgetting things. I was very indecisive. I just was not myself, and I was starting to worry, what's going on. And through the counseling I received, I realized that what I was going through was pretty normal, and that was very reassuring, believe me. And it was just very, very helpful to me.
Munson Hospice and the bereavement program, they allow you to be yourself and to try and be the best version of you that you can be. And without Erin and Sharon and Karen, who I've talked to now, and all the people that have been involved, I wouldn't be sitting here.
If I would have to use a few words to describe the Munson Hospice care team, I would have to use compassionate, kind, courteous, sincere, knowledgeable.
They provided, places for me to rest. They saw to it that I was hydrated, I had something to eat and drink. So not only did they take excellent care of my husband, they took care of me too, and I really appreciated that. Then I was able, after Jack passed, I was able to do the things that you immediately have to do when, those things happen. And I had recovered enough that I was able to do that. I wouldn't have been able to do that without the excellent care that I received here too.
How better than to provide funding for people that need this service in their community. Even though they don't know they need it now, we will all be dealing with lost loved ones, and many of them will be dealing with hospice. How better a way to show love to our community by then helping your neighbor in some of the most trying and most difficult times of their life when they're losing their loved ones. So I cannot express enough how important it is to have the resources we have here with Munson Hospice.
Wow, it's a powerful video, and it's always a tough act to follow when our patients and their families share their stories. But it's a testimony to the work that Sherry, Dr. Barraza, Dr. Tucker, Sharon, and Aaron, and all of their teams do each and every day. As the video illustrates, each patient that we serve comes to us with a life rich in stories and in love. And I know I speak for the entire hospice team when I say it's an honor to serve those patients and their families. And a special thank you to those three wonderful speakers today in the video who shared their bravery and their strength and sharing their journey with all of us. I'm grateful. I know we're running a little bit over on time, so I'll move quickly through this next part. But as so many of the speakers have said today, as our families shared in the video, donor support makes Munson Hospice possible. Since 2016, this annual breakfast has raised over $260,000, and we hope to continue that legacy with this year's event. As we all know, this year has been particularly difficult for our hospice teams, and they've taken on increased workloads while also facing volunteer restrictions. Everything that COVID has done to so many of us, you can imagine that the hospice team has felt it exponentially. They've carried a tremendous weight on their shoulders. And your financial gift is an important showing of support for this team. As of today, I'm excited to announce we've raised already $20,000 from this year's breakfast on our way to our goal of $30,000. So a big thank you to those of you who have already made a gift. And for those of you who have not, we hope you might consider a gift this morning to help us reach that $30,000 goal. Now, Kira's going to bring up a QR code. I'm sure this is probably not new to most of you because I see them everywhere we go now, which allows for touchless connectivity. But this will give you an opportunity to scan this with the camera app on your phone. And when you hold up your phone to the screen and scan with the camera open, it should bring up the donation page. So I'll give everybody a couple seconds to do that. It should open up directly to the online donation form so that you can then fill out and make a gift. And we'll keep the slide up for a minute or so to give everybody an opportunity to do this. And I'll be back in just a minute to wrap up our event. Okay, technology has certainly proven to be our friend this year, and I hope that that was not too complicated for those of you who decided to use it. For those of you who are not able to make a gift this morning, would like to do so later, we'll be sending out a follow-up email that has a link to our donation page, so you'll be able to just click and go there too. We'll also include the hospice video that we've showed this morning, and we encourage you to share with your own network, so thank you. I would like to take a quick moment to say a few thank yous. First to our event sponsors, Credit Union One, Cook Sheet Metal of Kalkaska, and Jimmy John's of Traverse City. Credit Union One in particular, they've been with us since the very beginning, and we are so grateful. Without their sponsorship and support, hospice would just not be possible. Thank you also to Mary Mintz, a hospice volunteer who provided the lovely harp music that we heard in the introduction slides this morning. And thank you also to Mark Ballinger, he's the Munson Hospice chaplain. He provided the guitar music that we just heard during the last slide. We're grateful to our hospice team members for their musical talents and for sharing that with us today. I'd also like to thank the foundation staff, particularly Kira Walkup. for all of their hard work pulling this event together. These virtual events are more work than you would think. So we are grateful to them for their tireless dedication to this event once again this year. And now, if I can invite today's speakers back on screen. I'd like to thank each of you. You're so grateful for you sharing your talents, your stories, and your journey with us today. And thank you for being part of this event. We are so lucky to have your skills and talents in our community and on our hospice team. I'd like to say thank you to each one of you joining us in the audience. Thank you for showing your support to Munson Hospice by giving your time and by making a gift. We definitely look forward to being together in person next year. But until then, stay safe and stay well. Thank you again.